When was the last time you saw a Harley Davidson dealership packed with riders? You probably can't remember, because today Harley is in serious trouble. The brand just posted a jaw-dropping $117 million loss. Sales are collapsing, dealerships are shutting their doors, and lifelong riders are turning their backs. What happened to America's most legendary motorcycle brand? How did Harley go from ruling the road to barely surviving? And here's the real question. Can they fix this mess before it's too late? Or is this the final ride? Stick around, because what's happening next will shock you. What's happening? For decades, Harley stood as an unshakable symbol of American freedom, rebellion, and craftsmanship. Yet in the fourth quarter of 2024, the brand posted a jaw-dropping financial loss of $117 million, a catastrophic swing from the $26 million profit it had recorded just 1 year earlier. To understand how this financial disaster unfolded, you need to look deeper than the headlines. Harley's troubles began long before the fourth quarter results were announced. For years, cracks had been forming in the foundation of the brand's business model, cracks that would eventually widen into a financial chasm. Since 2014, Harley Davidson stock has plummeted by nearly 65%, wiping out billions in shareholder value and shaking investor confidence. By late 2024, shares dropped below $30, triggering panic. The company's financial troubles deepened as global motorcycle shipments collapsed by over 53% year over year, and U.S. revenue fell 35%. Iconic dealerships, including Los Angeles Harley Davidson and Taboo Harley Davidson, permanently closed. Clear signs of a collapsing retail ecosystem and a brand in crisis. But while these financial figures are shocking, the root causes of Harley's collapse run deeper. The numbers are only the surface of the storm. To truly understand what went wrong, you need to examine the decisions that drove customers away. And that brings us to Harley's biggest and most obvious problem: the price problem. Harley's biggest enemy, its own price tag. Harley Davidson proudly positioned itself as a premium brand. The problem is, premium pricing does not mean much if your target audience cannot afford what you are selling. Over the past 10 years, Harley's entry-level models crept beyond the reach of blue-collar riders, the very people who made the brand iconic. Take the Sportster, Harley's so-called entry-level bike. By 2024, a new Sportster would set you back over $16,000 before adding any essential upgrades or accessories. For comparison, rival brands like Honda and Yamaha offered comparable cruisers in the $8,000 to $11,000 range. Even Indian Motorcycles, Harley's closest American competitor, offered its popular Scout model starting at just $11,000. It gets worse at the higher end. Harley's top-tier CVO Road Glide retailed for a staggering $45,000, roughly the price of a luxury car or 5 dream vacations. For most riders, that price tag was simply out of reach. This premium pricing strategy backfired spectacularly. Younger riders, who might have been the next generation of Harley loyalists, chose more affordable, practical options. Seasoned riders who once saw Harley as an aspirational brand began questioning whether it was worth the cost. In an economy marked by rising living costs, wage stagnation, and skyrocketing interest rates, Harley's price structure became a barrier, not a badge of honor. But price alone does not explain why riders stopped buying. What really hurt Harley was that riders who could afford a Harley often found themselves regretting the purchase. And that leads us to the next major problem: quality issues and customer backlash. Imagine paying $30,000 and your bike breaks down in 30 days. Reports of mechanical failures, build quality problems, and warranty disputes began flooding the internet. Riders complained of engine issues, electronic malfunctions, and cosmetic defects, all on brand new showroom bikes. It was not just anecdotal. Service departments at dealerships across the country saw a rise in new bike repairs. Riders posted pictures of cracked welds, faulty fuel gauges, and peeling paint jobs online, generating a storm of negative publicity. For a brand built on loyalty, that kind of bad press was a death sentence. The frustration did not stop at mechanical failures. Many customers felt ignored by Harley's corporate response. Warranty claims were often delayed, denied, or buried in fine print. Dealership staff, under pressure to meet sales quotas, struggled to offer meaningful solutions. But if mechanical problems were not enough, Harley made matters worse with another colossal mistake. It forgot what made its motorcycles special in the first place: Harley's design disaster. One of the biggest blows to Harley Davidson's brand identity was its disastrous design decisions over the past decade. The brand that once set the standard for American motorcycle aesthetics began releasing models that left loyal riders scratching their heads, or worse, turning to competitors. The clearest example was the V-Rod. Launched in the early 2000s as Harley's attempt to modernize its lineup, the V-Rod featured a water-cooled engine and futuristic styling. Hardcore riders rejected it. They did not want a Harley that looked like a science fiction prop. They wanted raw, muscular American iron. Then came the Pan America, Harley's foray into the adventure bike market. While the bike received decent critical reviews for performance, its design alienated Harley's core audience. Riders who spent decades buying into Harley's outlaw image had no interest in an off-road touring machine that looked more at home at a Silicon Valley tech conference than at Sturgis. Harley's design missteps extended beyond individual models. The brand abandoned its signature aesthetic in favor of chasing trends, sleeker lines, minimalist styling, and unnecessary innovation that had no connection to Harley's cultural roots. The result was a product lineup that felt soulless and disconnected from the riders who made Harley great. But Harley's biggest problem was not just poor design or premium pricing. It was something far more dangerous, a full-blown identity crisis. From rebels to shareholders, Harley Davidson was never meant to be a corporate brand. It was built on rebellion, freedom, and an unapologetic attitude that spoke to the working-class rider, the outlaw, the weekend warrior who lived for the open road. But somewhere along the way, Harley stopped building motorcycles for those people and started building them for shareholders. The shift began slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Harley went public in the 1980s, which on the surface seemed like a victory. It meant more capital, more growth, more expansion, but it also meant that Harley now had a new master: Wall Street. The people calling the shots were no longer bikers in leather jackets. They were corporate executives in tailored suits, looking at quarterly earnings reports instead of listening to the rumble of a V-twin engine. This change had a profound impact on the company's direction. Instead of focusing on loyal riders and timeless American craftsmanship, Harley began making decisions that prioritized stock price, investor sentiment, and short-term profits. Marketing campaigns shifted from celebrating the rugged freedom of the road to showcasing sanitized, polished lifestyle imagery meant to appeal to luxury consumers and corporate partners. The result? Harley lost its edge. It became a brand that looked more comfortable on a NASDAQ earnings report than at Sturgis Bike Week. The very riders who built Harley's empire, the blue-collar workers, the veterans, the outlaws, felt ignored, discarded, and replaced. But Harley's corporate pivot wasn't the only disastrous gamble. Their next move would alienate their riders even further and cost them millions in the process. The EV gamble that backfired. When Harley Davidson announced the Livewire, their first all-electric motorcycle, the world was stunned. It was supposed to be a bold step into the future, a reinvention of Harley's image as a modern, forward-thinking brand. But for the people who mattered most, their core riders, it felt like a slap in the face. Harley's leadership believed they could attract a new generation of eco-conscious, tech-savvy riders with a premium electric motorcycle, but they completely misread the room. The Livewire launched with a price tag of over $22,000, nearly the same price as Harley's flagship touring bikes. Worse yet, the range was limited. Charging times were long and the signature rumble of a Harley engine was gone. For the typical Harley rider, the Livewire wasn't just an overpriced product, it was an insult. It abandoned everything they loved about motorcycling: the noise, the power, the visceral experience of riding American iron. And for new riders, the Livewire offered nothing they couldn't get cheaper and better elsewhere. The financial fallout was catastrophic. Sales were dismal. Dealers couldn't move inventory. Harley eventually spun off Livewire into its own separate company, trying to distance itself from the failure. But the damage was already done. The EV gamble exposed just how out of touch Harley's leadership had become. They were chasing trends, trying to please investors and journalists instead of listening to the people who actually rode their bikes. And the backlash wasn't over. Because while Harley was chasing Silicon Valley dreams, they made another critical mistake, one that would ignite a firestorm of controversy: woke branding, the DEI backlash. In recent years, Harley Davidson jumped headfirst into diversity, equity, and inclusion marketing initiatives. Commercials shifted, social media campaigns focused on corporate responsibility messaging. Internal policies emphasized workplace diversity. On paper, it sounded like progress. But for Harley's core customers, it felt like betrayal. Many longtime Harley riders weren't interested in political statements or corporate activism. They were blue-collar workers, veterans, bikers who valued freedom, independence, and tradition, not corporate virtue signaling. When Harley began prioritizing DEI initiatives in their branding, many customers felt alienated. It wasn't about the values themselves, it was about the execution. Instead of celebrating the culture that built Harley Davidson, the company pandered to social trends and corporate expectations. Ads no longer featured rugged riders and rebellious energy. Instead, they felt sanitized, corporate, and disconnected from the gritty reality of Harley's community. The backlash was swift and brutal. Social media erupted with angry riders accusing Harley of going woke. Boycotts were organized. Dealerships reported declining foot traffic and increasing customer frustration. Harley's attempt to expand its audience had instead fractured the one it already had, and the consequences extended beyond sales. Harley's brand identity, the very thing that made it iconic, was crumbling under the weight of corporate posturing. But the real fallout wasn't just about marketing, it was about the trust that had been broken between Harley Davidson and its riders. Riders walked away. When trust was broken, the financial losses, overpriced motorcycles, design missteps, and corporate branding shifts weren't just business decisions. They were personal betrayals to the people who had spent decades riding Harleys, building the brand's legacy and passing it down to the next generation. For many, Harley's cultural shift felt like a rejection. Riders who had supported the company through thick and thin were now watching it pander to investors and activists instead of listening to the community that made it great. The outrage wasn't just online, it was real. Harley Owners Group memberships declined. Major rallies like Sturgis reported lower Harley attendance. Dealerships struggled to retain loyal customers. Entire riding communities felt abandoned. Some walked away quietly. Others made a public show of ditching their Harleys for Indian motorcycles, Triumphs, or even Japanese brands. Many vowed never to buy another Harley Davidson until the company returned to its roots. And that loss of trust may be Harley's biggest problem of all. Because once your riders no longer believe in you, no price cut or new model can bring them back easily. But Harley's fall wasn't just about business decisions. It was about something deeper, a brand that forgot who it was and who it was riding with. Indian's revenge. Harley Davidson once stood unchallenged, the undisputed king of American motorcycles. But while Harley struggled with its internal crisis, one brand quietly and methodically plotted a stunning comeback: Indian motorcycles. A brand Harley thought it had buried decades ago suddenly rose from the ashes, backed by a corporate powerhouse that knew exactly how to take Harley's throne. So how did Indian pull it off? And why couldn't Harley stop them? It all started when Polaris Industries, a veteran power sports company, purchased the rights to Indian motorcycles in 2011. Unlike previous attempts to revive the brand, Polaris had the resources, production capability, and industry know-how to do it right. But what really set Indian apart was how carefully they studied Harley's mistakes, and then did the exact opposite. While Harley kept raising prices and cutting corners, Indian focused on value and quality. They introduced the Thunderstroke and Power Plus engine lines, delivering classic V-twin performance without sacrificing modern reliability. Indian's bikes came loaded with premium components, Brembo brakes, modern infotainment systems, and high-quality paint jobs that made Harley's offerings look dated by comparison. But Indian didn't stop there. They aggressively priced their lineup to undercut Harley at every level. Models like the Scout and Chief Dark Horse delivered cruiser thrills at prices Harley couldn't match. And when Harley abandoned its own DNA with bikes like the V-Rod and Livewire, Indian doubled down on American heritage and classic styling. By 2023, Indian had stolen significant market share from Harley, with some models outselling their Harley counterparts for the first time in decades. Riders who felt betrayed by Harley's high prices, corporate messaging, and declining quality found a new home with Indian. It wasn't just about the bikes, it was about the culture, and Indian understood that better than Harley ever could. Indian's resurgence wasn't an isolated victory. It opened the floodgates for a global assault on Harley's dominance, and the next chapter reveals how international rivals finished what Indian started: the global takeover. While Harley was busy fighting off Indian's resurgence, results, a far bigger threat was rising quietly in the background. By the time Harley looked up, it was already too late. Japanese and European motorcycle giants had completely reshaped the global market, and Harley was left in the dust. It began decades ago, but by 2025, the results were undeniable. Brands like Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, BMW, and Royal Enfield had eaten away at Harley's market share year after year, offering better bikes at lower prices with fewer problems and broader appeal. Honda led the charge with motorcycles like the Rebel CB Series and Gold Wing, models that delivered comfort, performance, and reliability at a fraction of Harley's prices. Yamaha's MT Series and Bolt Cruisers attracted young urban riders who wanted a stylish bike without the Harley baggage. Kawasaki kept dominating with its Vulcan series, offering a cruiser experience with Japanese engineering precision. Meanwhile, European brands took aim at Harley's premium segment. BMW's R18 Cruiser and Royal Enfield's Interceptor 650 delivered heritage styling with modern engineering, targeting buyers who wanted classic aesthetics without the premium price tag. Even Triumph's Bonneville series stole away riders who once would have bought a Sportster or Softail. These international brands understood something Harley never did. They built motorcycles for the world, not just for America's aging cruiser crowd. Their global strategies, accessible pricing, and superior quality turned Harley into a niche player, irrelevant outside North America. And while Harley's global market collapsed, the damage didn't stop at the corporate level. The next chapter explores how this market shift devastated Harley's once powerful dealership network. The dealer collapse. The financial collapse of Harley Davidson wasn't limited to boardrooms and factories. It hit hardest on the ground in the local dealerships that were once the beating heart of American motorcycle culture. As Harley's sales plummeted, so too did the fortunes of thousands of small business owners who built their lives around the brand. Between 2023 and 2025, dozens of Harley dealerships across the United States shut their doors permanently. From Fullerton, California to Alexandria, Louisiana, family-owned dealerships that had been in business for generations couldn't weather the storm. The problem was twofold. First, Harley's collapsing sales meant that dealers were sitting on piles of unsold inventory. Each bike sitting on the showroom floor represented a financial liability, with the dealers paying interest on floor plan loans month after month without making sales. As interest rates climbed and foot traffic vanished, many dealers simply couldn't survive. Second, Harley's attempt to modernize and streamline its dealer network backfired. In an effort to cut costs, Harley reduced dealer margins, imposed stricter franchise terms, and pushed smaller dealers out of the network entirely. This left many communities without a local Harley shop and gutted the grassroots culture that made Harley what it was. The collapse of Harley dealerships wasn't just an economic tragedy, it was a cultural one. These local shops were gathering places, riding hubs, and community cornerstones. Their closure meant the loss of biker meetups, charity rides, and a unique slice of American life. But while Harley watched its dealer network implode, it failed to recognize the most dangerous trend of all, the rise of a new generation of riders who wanted something entirely different. The market Harley ignored. Harley Davidson didn't just lose because of bad pricing, poor design, or crumbling dealerships. Its biggest mistake was ignoring the future, the next generation of riders who would shape the motorcycle industry for decades to come. For years, data showed that younger riders were turning away from traditional cruisers. Millennials and Gen Z consumers weren't interested in heavyweight, overpriced motorcycles. They wanted affordable, lightweight, fuel-efficient bikes that fit their lifestyles. Urban riders preferred nimble city bikes. Adventure seekers gravitated toward dual sport and adventure motorcycles. Tech-savvy consumers valued modern features and connectivity. While competitors like Honda and Royal Enfield rushed to meet this demand with small displacement, beginner-friendly bikes, Harley stubbornly clung to its aging cruiser lineup. Even when it introduced the Street Series aimed at younger riders, the bikes were overpriced, underwhelming, and too late to capture the market. Harley's attempts to innovate, like the Livewire electric motorcycle, missed the mark entirely. The Livewire was priced at over $20,000, out of reach for the young, eco-conscious buyers it was supposedly designed for. Meanwhile, ride-sharing apps, subscription services, and micro-mobility solutions exploded in popularity. Younger consumers weren't looking to own a bulky cruiser. They wanted affordable, flexible transportation options. Harley's entire business model, built around ownership, brand loyalty, and premium pricing, felt outdated. By ignoring new riders and urban trends, Harley alienated the very people who could have kept the brand alive. And as the next part of this story reveals, Harley's failure to evolve would lead to the most devastating consequences yet. Harley's last comeback story. Harley has been here before, but this time it's different. Harley Davidson's current crisis isn't the first time the brand has been on the brink. If you rewind to the late 1970s and early 1980s, Harley was circling the drain. Back then, it wasn't just declining sales, it was outright corporate collapse. Under the ownership of American Machine and Foundry, better known as AMF, Harley Davidson became a punchline. Quality control went out the window, production costs soared, and the once rebellious American motorcycle became synonymous with breakdowns and disappointment. But then something incredible happened. In 1981, a group of Harley-Davidson executives bought the company back from AMF, mortgaged everything they owned, and started the most famous corporate turnaround in motorcycle history. They focused on quality, embraced their American heritage, and, most importantly, listened to riders. Harley leaned into what made it iconic: heavy cruisers, American craftsmanship, and the loud, rebellious culture their customers loved. That playbook worked back then. Harley rose from the ashes and became the dominant force in American motorcycling once again. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Those same moves won't work today. The world has changed. The customer base has changed, and the competition is fiercer than ever. This time, Harley's roadback won't be as simple. But before we talk about what went wrong, let's look at what Harley has to do right now to avoid total collapse. Can Harley be saved? The toughest choice is ahead. There's only one way Harley survives, but it won't be easy. The hard truth is that Harley-Davidson is running out of options. If the company wants to avoid becoming a footnote in motorcycle history, it needs to make drastic changes now. First, it has to lower prices. The days of $16,000 entry-level bikes are over. Harley can't expect younger riders, first-time buyers, or working-class enthusiasts to fork over that kind of cash. Affordability isn't just a nice bonus anymore. It's the difference between survival and extinction. Second, Harley has to cut corporate fat. For years, the company has been bloated with executive salaries, overpaid consultants, and bloated marketing budgets focused more on Wall Street than Main Street. That strategy has failed. Harley needs to refocus every dollar on product quality, dealer support, and customer satisfaction. Finally, the biggest and most painful step, Harley must return to its core audience. That means stepping away from flashy electric bikes, corporate branding exercises, and shallow attempts to appeal to people who never wanted a Harley in the first place. Harley's soul was built by blue-collar riders, veterans, mechanics, and rebels. If they lose those people, they lose everything. It won't be easy. These changes will hurt. They'll mean layoffs, plant closures, and big losses in the short term, but without them, there won't be a long term. And if Harley doesn't act fast, the consequences won't just affect bikers, it will send shockwaves across American culture. What happens if they fail? The blockbuster parallel. If you want to know what happens when a legendary brand refuses to adapt, look no further than Blockbuster. They had everything: market dominance, a loyal customer base, and a cultural identity. But they ignored the signs, they clung to outdated business models, ignored changing customer behavior, and refused to pivot when it mattered. Today, Blockbuster is nothing more than a meme, a reminder of what happens when a giant falls asleep at the wheel. Harley-Davidson is headed for the same fate, and when Harley collapses, it won't just be a corporate failure, it will be a cultural funeral. Thousands of dealerships will close. Tens of thousands of manufacturing and sales jobs will vanish. Small towns built around Harley plants and dealerships will suffer. The American motorcycle industry itself will crumble. Without Harley, there's no anchor, no symbol. Competitors like Indian, Royal Enfield, and the Japanese brands will fill the void, but the uniquely American voice of motorcycling will be gone. And beyond the industry, something even bigger will disappear: the myth of Harley. That idea of freedom, rebellion, and open roads will fade into nostalgia. If Harley goes bankrupt, America doesn't just lose a company, it loses part of its identity. Companies in every industry, whether it's retail, entertainment, or tech, are forgetting their roots, abandoning their communities, and selling out their culture for short-term profits. else. So the next time you see a Harley Davidson on the road or hear that unmistakable rumble in the distance, remember, it's not just a bike. It's a symbol of what we can lose when we forget where we came from. Because whether Harley roars back or fades into history, the real question is, are we paying attention to the warning signs? What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, check out the other videos on the channel and don't forget to like and subscribe.